Chapter 25. Practice had continued into much of the evening, and I was able to experience firsthand the difference between pushing and pulling. At first, I was convinced that I could pull a bullet and then stop it before it smashed into my skull. That was until they changed caliber, and I pulled a bullet from a .30-30 rifle directly into my chest. Of course, Zoo stopped it an inch before I ruined a perfectly good shirt. I then managed to ruin another perfectly good pair of underwear. After a truly deep and paralyzing sleep, I decided that no matter the time, my brain was far too active. My expectation was to find the big room empty where I could calmly play some quiet piano. Unfortunately, Nella was already in action, and to my surprise, Jack, the banker, was shuffling some papers on the table with her. They both looked up when I entered. Nella's expression was wary of my presence intruding on their private meeting, but Jack, the consummate professional, shifted into a broad smile and locked his gaze on me. It was unnerving. "Good morning, Finn," Jack announced with more volume and enthusiasm than was necessary for an early Saturday morning. "Come on over. We're reviewing some financial data." "Sounds riveting," I said with as much sarcasm as one can drip into 2 words. "No, really," he replied with a laugh. "You may be surprised to find that the financial background of the Fallen Network is quite sophisticated and deeply entrenched." "Anything that would concern me directly?" I asked. "Indeed. Seems that an inquiry has been made into purchasing the coffee shop owned by Mama Joe. Now, it could be nothing, but it would be a common tactic to undermine our network. We actually do the same thing when we can." "What do you mean they tried to buy the shop? Is that even for sale?" I felt like I was about to be evicted. No, nothing like that. The fallen seekers often try to insert themselves into our routine so they can gain intel. Think of it like a hotel that has cockroaches on one floor." Nella groaned and rolled her eyes. Jack laughed and replied, "Oh yeah, you hate this analogy. Anyway," he continued, ignoring Nella, "if you have cockroaches in your hotel, one way to get rid of them is to put sonic devices in each room so they are irritated and escape. The obvious problem with that solution is that the roaches will spread to another floor, and you will have increased your problem." "Makes sense," I replied. "What's the other method?" "Draw them in. Make the roaches think that nothing has changed, and one by one, poison, trap, or incapacitate them. The most common method is to have one roach share poison bait with the rest. In short order, all roaches are dead or exposed." "Seems like a good idea, and I take it Nella disapproves of being compared to a roach?" They both laughed, and Nella responded, "The question is whether the new roach on the scene is carrying poisonous bait to kill the rest of us." Her eyes were full of accusation, and the sting caught me off guard. "Hey now, you brought me into this, not the other way around." Jack took a serious tone. "That's not the point. If the roach knew it was carrying poison, it would most certainly not share it with the rest of the pack. How would you know if you were being used as poisonous bait?" "I assume the unfortunate and unproven incident of my cell phone has been shared with you." An edge was evident in my voice. "Relax," Jack said with a booming voice and a confident smile. "They may be trying to use you as bait, but we are smarter than your average cockroach. We can protect ourselves and you through this mess. In fact, if we play our cards right, we may be able to draw them out and foil their plans. Nella and I are way ahead of you. Our backup plans have multiple backup plans." Nella stood. "Do you want some breakfast before we head out?" It was only about 6 a.m., so I assumed it would be a few hours before we left, and I was indeed quite surprised to see Nella taking the initiative for me to go and talk to Tiffany. A little too anxious, if you asked me. "Why the sudden rush to connect with Tiffany?" I asked. "What do you have planned?" "Ha! Not what you think. It's true I think she is a seeker, but it may also be true that she could be useful to us. give up the identities or locations of other fallen spies. Or I could be wrong altogether, I suppose. I was certainly wrong about you." "Hey now, what is that supposed to mean?" I asked. "I never thought you were the source of the healing," she said matter-of-factly. "True, most everyone stumbles onto the power, or they see someone else do something that their brain can't register, so they get an introduction and start from ground zero and build up their capabilities. You, on the other hand, started out performing one of the more complicated uses of the power, and you did it by accident. I've been doing this a while, and it is the first time I've seen it. I'm still skeptical that you may indeed know more than you are letting on, and a great deal depends on how you respond to events today, to Tiffany. You will need to make a choice, and continue with us or follow her. I don't see another path." "There's always another path. I am not a bird to be caged. My path is my own, and is unwritten." My response was low and almost a whisper. "We shall see, Nella. I may not be done proving you wrong. I can tell you one thing for certain. This box," I said, pointing to the big room with one door, "is much too small for someone as big as me." Both Nella and Jack silently nodded back at me. Today was set to be the turning point. Never have I been so unaware of my future. I found it unnerving. The ride to the coffee shop was mostly quiet. No conversation, no radio. It would have been peaceful if there wasn't so much tension and anticipation in the air. Hours of sleep were lost last night trying to figure out how the conversation with Tiffany would go today. Admittedly, the more I dwelt on the facts, the more I realized that Nella was most likely correct. But there was more. If nothing else, I needed some closure. If Tiffany was indeed knowingly and willingly behind the attack on Daniel, Nella, and myself, then there was no point in wasting another brain cell thinking about her or her amazing legs. Well, maybe just a few brain cells now and then. Nella broke the silence. "How do you plan on contacting her? Just going to give her a call? I see you haven't turned your phone on yet." "No, I'm waiting till I get back to Mama Joe's to turn it on. If my cell is being tracked, like you said, then I want to be ready and pick the place. Sure, they must know that I'm alive, so they will probably be watching the coffee shop anyway." Nella gave a slow nod and smiled. "You are being cautious. That's good, and we'll keep you alive. Expect a trap, then be pleasantly surprised when there isn't one." "What a shitty way to live," I replied. "Ever think about striking back? Why not go on the attack? Start taking them out, like that friend of Mac. What was his name again?" Nella's expression hinted at some remorse when she replied, "Nico. His name is Nico, and he is on his own. You cannot build a fortress of love with bricks of hate. He thinks he is helping, of course, but we cannot take a chance even associating with him. I haven't seen him in 10 years, but Mac seems to think he is still alive." "You hinted that hunters don't always use guns because they can be used against them, like you did when we were attacked. That seems to be a fairly successful tactic. Why not just continue with that game plan?" Nella replied quickly, with a very real irritation in her voice. "If you choose to pull the trigger on someone, you had better be sure that you won't need to use the power anytime soon. Sure, you can pull a gun out of someone's hand, but if you plan on using that gun to blow their head off, the power will fail you. Your intent is not to love, so the power will not respond." "So when I pulled the gun out of the guy's hand, it was because I had no intention of shooting him." "And he knew it," Nella broke in. "He knew that the only way to pull the gun with the power is to be connected to a positive source like love or hope or joy. Therefore, he knew you had no intention of shooting him." It was all starting to connect now. "That makes sense, actually." I can't believe those words left my mouth. "His demeanor totally changed, though, when you physically grabbed the gun out of my hands. Since you didn't use the power, he knew you weren't trying to tap into a positive source. that you were now playing his game. Nella didn't respond, or even look my way. Her eyes were straight ahead as she just drove. If I wasn't mistaken, she was not proud of what she had done. We arrived at the coffee shop as the sun was brightening the sky. As I turned to hop out of the car, Nella grabbed my arm and said, "Remember, Finn, you can't love and hate at the same time. Choose which path to follow. Once you decide to pull the trigger, you are on your own. The power won't help you. You play their game, and you play alone."